So for those of you that have been following along, you'll know that we've looked at the difference between a traditional CMS and a headless CMS, and we've also looked into how to build a responsive website in 2026. Today we're going to be taking that foundation of knowledge, heading into Wix Studio, and building a responsive site design that relies on data pulled from the CMS. I'm Sam, and I help people like you grow your brand to success online without any overwhelm. So without further ado, let's get to it. So before we get started, I just wanted to quickly show you what we're going to be building today. So you can see here, this is the website example that we're going to be putting together in Wix Studio. A nice straightforward, nothing too complicated hero section with a simple selected project section that pulls data from the CMS. So we're going to be setting up a CMS, we're going to be pulling in data and displaying it on the screen, and just covering the basics of how to make your website responsive in Wix Studio. So let's head into Wix Studio and get started. So you'll need to set up a free Wix Studio account to begin, and you'll arrive at this dashboard. Now, I've already used it before, so I've got 2 projects sat here in my sites, but yours will be blank. And to create a new site, you guessed it, you're going to click the Create New Site button. And I'm going to say blank canvas. This just means that we're going to start completely from scratch. We're not going to rely too much on templates. And this is going to give you the best opportunity to sort of learn how to create a responsive layout. If you're getting started and you want to jump through things at a much faster pace, there's absolutely nothing wrong with relying on the templates to get you started. So we're going to click Create with a blank canvas. And there we go, Wix Studio has loaded. So we have this blank project here. And as you can see, it comes with a navigation bar and a footer by default. Now, because I want to build everything myself, I'm actually going to select these and hit backspace or delete to remove them. If you want them there and that's an easier way for you to get started, then by all means, leave them in their place. So there are kind of 3 ways to get started with your first section. And bear in mind, Wix Studio won't ever let you delete absolutely every section. There always needs to be a minimum of 1 in your projects. So with this blank section selected, you can see we've got 3 options for our starting point. You can choose a pre-designed section, you can choose a layout, or you can begin adding elements. Now, we're going to start styling this straight away. So the design you saw has a nice full screen image. So it makes sense to start with the background image and getting the sizing correct for the hero section. So with the section selected, we're going to come over to the right hand side. In media, we're going to click add image or video. This is where we manage all of our media. And as you can see, if you've got no content to begin with, Wix Studio makes it really easy to still make a start on your website with some really high quality stock images. I've already prepared the assets, so I'm going to go ahead and upload them now. What we need to do is go to Site Files and click Upload Media. You're then going to click Upload from Computer, browse to the location where you've got them stored, and click Upload. Once you've selected your files, it'll take a second or 2 just to upload all of them. And I recommend if you've got everything prepared beforehand, just upload them all in one hit, and then they're usable throughout your site from that point forward. Perfect. So what we were doing was selecting the background image for the hero section. So I'm going to choose the image that I've pre-named hero and click change background. The image has gone in and it looks great, but what we want to make sure is that this section fills the screen, because as you can see from the sample site, this is a full screen, full width section. So let's head over to the section design panel. We're going to come across to the responsive behavior and we're going to go fit to screen. Before we go any further, I'm just going to quickly explain what the responsive behavior section actually does. Now, this is something you're going to use not just on sections, but also on specific elements across your site. And what this does is it determines how this specific element or section is going to respond as your screen width or device screen changes. So you'll see here that next to the canvas, we've got 2 handles that we can drag in or out just to see how this would behave on bigger and smaller screen sizes. As we get further into this, we'll also switch at the top between tablet and mobile breakpoints, but we'll get to that later. So the responsive behavior that we're looking for with our section is that it always fills the available height and width of the full screen. So the responsive behavior that we're looking for is fit to screen. Nicely named, right? So we brought in our image and it now fills the height and width of the screen. We can now start dragging elements in and manually positioning them. However, there's one step that can take this a little bit further just to make things easier as we start arranging our elements. So with our hero section still selected, we're going to scroll down towards the bottom of the design panel and come to the section that says padding. Really important is to make sure if we're trying to set a fixed pixel distance between the edge of our content and the edge of our section, that we set this to pixels and not scale pixels. And you'll know the difference because scale pixels have a little asterisk straight after them. We're looking for px and nothing else. So set this to px just to make sure that whatever we set in this box, it doesn't adjust based on screen size. It's an exact value for this breakpoint. I'm going to set a gap of 48 on the left and right, and then 48 on the top and bottom. And just to give you a little indicator of what I'm talking about, you can see here on the panel, those little green guide boxes appear. So this just means that when I start dragging in content, I don't want it to go straight to the edge. I want it 48 pixels from the top and 48 pixels from the left. Or if you're placing it in the bottom right, 48 pixels from the right and 48 pixels from the bottom. So let's start bringing in some of the elements that we're going to need for our hero section. So I'm going to navigate to the media panel, go to Site Files, select my logo and click Add to Page. And with our logo now on the canvas, it's as easy as dragging it into position and manually setting the size. Now we can drag and set a size that looks sort of roughly right, or we can come over to the right-hand side and we can set a specific value. Now I already know that I want my logo to be 64 pixels high and 64 pixels wide. But there's a slight issue, and you'll see again that when we look at the sizing options, the pixel value actually has an asterisk next to it. Now, anywhere in Wix Studio you see PX asterisk, it's telling you that it's going to change slightly as the page adapts to different screen sizes. So if we have a little quick look at the logo now, and I start adjusting the size of the screen, you'll see as it gets bigger, so does the logo, and as it gets smaller, again, so does the logo. And if we want to avoid this, and we want to actually set a specific fixed value, then we're going to try and tell the studio how to handle responsiveness. And you'll start to see with responsive design in Wix Studio, this is a very common theme. Coming into the responsive behavior and telling it exactly how you want that element to behave. With our logo, we want a fixed height and width that doesn't change based on the screen's width. So we're going to select fixed. Now the values have changed from PX asterisk to just PX, which means that that's an explicit pixel value that's not going to change based on the screen size. And we can preview this again by adjusting the size of our canvas. And now we can see the logo stays exactly the same height and width. So let's continue adding elements to our hero section. The next thing I'm going to add is that main call to action button in the top right. So let's click Add Elements. We're going to go to Quick Add, and there we can see the button element, and it's as simple as dragging and dropping that onto your canvas. The next thing is to edit the text. So we're going to click Change Text, and I'm going to type in Inquire. We'll click Close. And the next thing we want to do is to set up our responsive behavior for this element. Now, I want to set a fixed width and height and font size and ensure that across all screen widths, this stays identical. Now that doesn't mean we don't get control when things switch to, say, tablet and mobile breakpoints. We can still make changes on different devices. However, as the screen gets bigger and smaller on the desktop breakpoint, I want this to remain at exactly the same height and width that's set by me. So to do this, we'll go to responsive behavior and ensure that it's set to fixed. Next, I'm going to adjust the width to be something a little bit smaller, just to be a little bit closer to the text. And I'm going to make it a tiny bit taller. And from there, we can drag and drop nice and simply our button into place. So I want to align this all the way to the right. I also want to align it centrally with the logo, somewhere about there. So let's start adjusting some of the visual settings. So I don't want my button to have any background. I want a white border. So we're going to remove the background by setting the opacity all the way down to 0%. We're going to go to border. We're going to select the border color white. Now we won't actually get a border until we set a pixel width value. So we're going to set this to 1. And now you can see that we've got a button in the top right hand side with a solid white 1 pixel border. The next thing to do is edit our text settings. So for me, that text is a little bit on the smaller side. So I'm going to size it up by setting this to paragraph 1. And as you can see, this is set to 18 pixels. I'm also going to make the text on my button bold just by clicking this bold icon here. And the last step in styling this button is to affect how it will look on hover. So underneath the design section, you'll see we've got regular and hover. If we switch over to the hover mode, it's going to give you a preview of what that's going to look like. And what we want to do is set the background to fill white. The text color is now going to have to switch to the opposite, to black. And if we give this a quick preview, you can see what that's done. So our button is ready to go. Next, let's drag in our text. So again, click Add Elements. We're going to start with our title. And again, just drag and drop this onto the canvas. To edit the text, we're going to double click and paste in our copy. And then we're going to set the visual style to make this look exactly as we want. Now for this, I do actually want this to scale proportionally, and I'll show you why in just a second. First of all, let's make it so we can actually see the text by setting the text color. So at the moment, you'll see the color is black. Let's set that to white. I'm going to want this to be a heading 1. It's the main heading on the page, and that's really, really important. And if that's changed your color by default, then just go back and readjust the color. I'm then going to adjust the width of this box until I'm happy with how it looks. And even though we've used that predefined heading 1 style, we can still manually adjust the font size. So I'm going to set this around 64 pixels. I'm going to adjust the width of the text box until I'm happy. And I'm going to move my text into position. Nice. Now there's one more element missing, and that's the small chunk of text in the bottom right. So again, we're going to go to Add Elements. This time we're going to move it in a paragraph, drag and drop onto the canvas, double click and paste in our text. ensure that this is styled how we want it to be. So I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to set this to paragraph 1. It's slightly bigger, and I'm going to set the color. I'm then going to adjust the width of the text box until I'm happy with how it looks. And again, I'm going to drag this into position. So I'm overall happy with how this is looking. The next thing is ensuring that it works correctly as that screen starts to change size. So if we grab the edges of the canvas and start resizing, you can see that actually on the whole, this works quite well. And there's a reason for this, and it's because for our text, we have kept the responsive behavior to scale proportionally. Now, what that means is as our canvas is growing and shrinking, it's going to stretch the text to fit. This avoids any potential problems with, say, a screen getting too small. And again, this is really important. This is not talking breakpoints. We're not talking about a screen getting so small that it's the size of a tablet. We're just talking about that range of screen widths available on desktop devices. What this means is as the screen gets smaller, you're going to guarantee that what you get is pretty similar to what's on your canvas right now. So I'm going to give this a little bit more breathing room, and there's a reason for that. You'll see here as I start to adjust on the canvas, if I make it slightly smaller, it actually does start to rearrange the line position of the text. So the moments drops down there onto a third line of text. And you can see as well on the chunk of text on the right hand side, it just starts to leak down a line or two. So to do this, I'm literally just going to drag the edge of that box just a little bit beyond what we need. And now, as you can see, that's completely fixed. Let's do the same. So coming over here, let's just give this a tiny bit more breathing room, and fingers crossed, on the whole, that should keep things fixed. So our hero section is in and it's looking good. Now, as mentioned, there are 3 breakpoints that we can adjust at the top. So at any point we can preview the design and see how it's looking. And to be honest with you, for the desktop breakpoint, I'm really happy. What about smaller devices like tablet and mobile? To do this, we're going to navigate to the top of the screen, and you'll see here we've got 3 device previews. We've got our desktop, tablet, and mobile. Let's head into tablet to now see what this looks like on a tablet device. So all in all, it actually doesn't look too bad. I'm going to make some changes. For example, this block of text on the bottom right is looking a little bit cramped, but all in all, it's looking quite good. Something I like to do as the screen size gets smaller and as devices get smaller and smaller is adjust the padding. So on the desktop device, we set the padding around the edge to 48 pixels. And now we're going to be pleased we did that, because with the section selected, if we scroll down to padding and set this to somewhere around 32, so not a massive difference, we're just slightly reducing it to give ourselves a bit more breathing room, you'll notice that all of the elements automatically adjusted their position. That's because when we place them in the canvas, we drag them into position relative to that padding. So we now have a little bit more space to play with. And again, I'm kind of on the whole happy with how this is looking, but I really do feel like some of the text could do with being sized up. So I'm going to set the font size for the block of text to 16 pixels and adjust the width to somewhere around here. And for me, I feel like on a device this small, big text is going to stand out much nicer than cramped small text. So I'm going to see how this looks in, say, 48 pixels. And again, at any point, we can just start dragging the canvas to see how it responds. And I'm now really happy with this section. Let's repeat this process again for mobile. Now, mobile, as you can see, is where we're going to need to deal with the most dramatic changes. So again, let's scroll down to padding. And at the moment, that's set to 0 pixels. I do still want to have some padding. I'm going to go with 24 pixels now. And you can probably see how I've done this. So bigger screen size, 48 pixels. The medium screen size on tablet, 32 pixels. Then coming down to mobile, we've got 24. So we've still got that gap just to keep things tidy, but it's just got that little bit smaller as we've got towards a smaller screen size, just to give us some more room on the canvas. Now for mobile, this left and right alignment of the text at the bottom, it doesn't feel too good to me. It feels a bit cramped, and I think the best thing we can do is just overhaul this alignment for this one screen size. So I'm going to move our title up and out the way, and we'll come back to that in a second. Let's get the text correct. I wouldn't go too small with your text size. Somewhere around 12 pixels is really quite small. So I'm going to go with around 16 pixels. And I'm going to make sure that my text box fills the canvas. Lovely. That's still going to remain anchored to the bottom. And if ever at any point you want to check what your element is anchoring itself to, just scroll down to the bottom and you can see where it says margins. And here through these 2 highlighted boxes, you can see that I have anchored my element to the left and the bottom by 0 pixels. Or if you're on the canvas with the element selected, you can see we've got a blue circle here and a blue circle here. And that just tells me that it's anchored all the way to the left and all the way to the bottom. So effectively what that means is as the screen grows and shrinks, it's going to stay anchored to the bottom left of the canvas. Now, here's how to know that's not what's happening for the title. As things get bigger or smaller, you can see the title is moving up and down completely differently to the text at the bottom. Now, I would say, based on how this is moving down as the screen gets bigger, that it's actually anchored to the top. So if we select this element and come down, we can see that it's actually setting itself to 448 pixels from the top. We don't want that at all. We want to ensure that it's docked to the bottom of the screen. That way, as we start to adjust the screen size, its position is relative to the other elements that are docked at the bottom of the screen. Let's make this full width and adjust the font size. Let's try 40, and let's drag this into a nicer position. So you can see there with our dotted line between the bottom of our element and the anchor point, that this is now anchored to the bottom and the left. And if we start moving our canvas between all points on the mobile breakpoint, I'm happy with how this is responding. So now we have built a fully responsive hero section that works nice on desktop, on tablet, and on mobile. So now we've covered responsive design in Wix Studio. We've built a hero section, we've adjusted its display on different screen sizes, and that really is the essence of responsive web design. It basically means that our users are getting a good experience and one that we're in control of, and not just a shrunken down version of the desktop or one that they've got to zoom in to find information. It's nice and accessible. The content adjusts itself to the medium that they have chosen. So the second part of this tutorial was the CMS and how we can not only design something that's responsive, but also bring in the CMS that we were speaking about in that previous tutorial. So let's set up a CMS collection before we go any further. On the left-hand side, we're going to scroll down to CMS. We're going to give that a click and we're going to click Start Now. Now we don't want any of the predefined selections. We're actually going to make this from scratch. So once this is loaded in, we're going to go Your Collections and Create Collection. And it's going to give us a few options. Again, we want to start from scratch. We want to be fully in control of our CMS collection. Click Next. Now this is going to be a multiple item collection, and I'm going to name this Projects. I'm going to click Create, and now we have an empty table, or effectively a blank canvas CMS. Just for the sake of keeping things really, really simple, I'm going to delete everything we don't need. So for this particular project, I'm going to keep title and image. And to do this, we're going to click the three-dot menu next to a column we don't need, and then click Delete. So now we're left with the title and the image. I'm going to begin adding some items to our collection. Let's click Add Item. We're going to give it a name, and then we're going to add in an image. So we're going to go through our site files. We're going to select the right image and click Add to Item. I'm going to do this 2 more times for our remaining items. And there we have our CMS ready to go. So this is automatically saved. We can just close this down and begin designing our responsive CMS section. We're going to go all the way down to the bottom of the canvas and click Add Section. We're going to give this new section a black background, and we're going to start bringing in some of our elements. Now again, we're going to add in our padding to begin with to give us something to anchor our elements to. So scrolling down to the bottom of the design panel, with that section selected, we're going to add 48 pixels of padding on the left and right. We're going to space this a little bit more generously. We're going to go with 96 pixels on the top and bottom. Again, we can see that the pixel value has an asterisk following it, which means that it's currently set to scale proportionally. And for now, that's absolutely fine. So if we review our example website, we have a title, a button, and then 3 CMS entries. So let's bring in our title by going Add Elements, Title, and dragging that onto the canvas. I'm going to set the font color straight away just so I can see what I'm working with. And heading 2 is absolutely fine for a secondary heading. Double click the text to edit, and we're going to change the text. Now for me, this feels a little bit big, so I'm going to just change the font size down to say around 24 pixels and drag this into position. So we could now add another button by clicking Add Elements and dragging in a button, but why waste time when we already have one set up with hover effect? So I'm going to click Copy by going Control and C or Command C, or you can right click Copy, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to click Paste. Let's bring that into position, and there we go. I'm going to just slightly adjust selected projects down so it aligns with the middle of our button. And next we're going to need to bring in a repeater. So if we go into Add Elements, and then you'll see this element here called repeater. Now what this is effectively a way of creating repeated style content on our page. So again, we'll jump back to the example. You can see here how exactly the same layout and sort of setup exists for these 3 elements. The only thing changing is the content itself. So we've got a background image and a title for all 3. So repeaters definitely make sense. Let's drag in a repeater and place that in the right position. So we want to fill the width to ensure that as the screen changes size, it's adjusting automatically to that screen width. And what we're going to do is start bringing in what we need for each item. So I'm going to just reduce the height of this slightly. I think it looks better with that more sort of horizontal layout. And with the repeater selected, I'm just going to adjust the gap. So if you scroll down to gaps, we can increase the spacing between these items. I'm going to go with 24 pixels. Perfect. Let's add in the elements we need. We have a background image, which I'm going to click this little icon in the top right to stretch it to fill the available space. And then next we're going to add in our small heading. So let's drag in a title element, and you'll see as I start editing one item in a repeater, the other two automatically update to reflect what I'm doing. So let's reduce the size of this font. I'm going to go with a heading 3 and somewhere around 24 pixels. Let's drag this into position, and I'm going to want to anchor this to the bottom left. And again, if we scroll down to the bottom of the design panel with our element selected, we can see that at the moment this is anchored 19 pixels from the left and 201 pixels from the top. Now with this being positioned in the bottom left, it makes a lot more sense to set our position from the left and from the bottom. Lovely. So the next thing to do is to connect the data in our CMS collection with this repeater item. So I'm going to select the image, and what I'm going to do, you can either access this through the little pop-up menu, or what I like to do is come over to the panel all the way on the right hand side, go to CMS collections, and we're going to add a data set. We're going to choose the collection that we set up earlier called projects, and we're going to create that data set. Now what we're going to do is scroll down to image source under connections, and we're going to connect our image, and you will see straight away this updates across our 3 items. We'll do exactly the same thing for our title element. Let's click our title, let's come down to connections, and let's connect the text to our title. And let's go back to the design panel and ensure that we can read that title by setting the font color to something that looks nice. Lovely. Now again, we're going to want to set up the responsive behavior for every element. So on the whole, this section will probably work really, really well with scale proportionally on. If you wanted your text, however, to remain consistent, what we can do is set a font size that you're happy with. I'm going to go a little bit smaller, and then rather than scale proportionally, I'm going to set this to fixed. So now as I make this bigger and smaller, you'll see that the font size remains identical. Now we can do this again for the selected projects text or anything you need to. The last step at the moment is this big gap we've got here at the bottom. I'm just going to make sure that our section is only as tall as it needs to be. So desktop, let's give it a preview. And I'm happy we've got a nice full screen hero section. We've got buttons with hover effects applied. We've got our text laid out. And as we scroll down, we now have this nice looking CMS collection that's taking data from a table that we've set up in the CMS editor and pulling that into our design. Now at any point, we can go back to that CMS table, make some changes, and they'll reflect right here on the canvas. So the last thing to do is to ensure that this works on all devices. So we've made sure it looks good on desktop. Let's come up to the top and check out how it looks on tablet. Now on the whole, I'm happy with how this is looking. However, there are some alignment issues. You can see now there's no gap between our button and our repeater. There's actually a little bit of overlap. And I would say some of these fonts need adjusting in terms of their size. So to give us a little bit of room to play with, let's just make this section a little bit taller, and let's drag our repeater down. Now we can bring this back up to ensure it's no taller than it needs to be. And for me, I'm happy with the alignment. I just want to make this font a little bit bigger. In fact, let's go with somewhere around 24 pixels. And again, we're going to want to line that up with our button. I'm really happy with how that looks. It scales, it looks good. Both the hero section and our new section are looking good on desktop and on tablet. So let's go down one more onto mobile. And this is again where we're going to want to make the most dramatic change. So select the section, and again, let's give ourselves plenty of room to work with by making this section nice and tall. So with most websites that use repeated content, say a blog or essentially anywhere that uses a repeater where you'll have a sort of row of 3 items, it's very common that you either get to tablet and have a scrolling experience or that they stack vertically. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to ensure that they stack vertically. So let's select our repeater, again coming over to the right hand side, and we are going to scroll down to our set items per row and set this to 1. What that means is there's now 1 item per row, which means that it's going to stack into 1 column. We're going to select our first item and just make this a little bit taller, somewhere around 180 pixels. That looks really good, and it'll automatically adjust the images to fit. Now I'm happy with how the repeat is looking. I want to just slightly increase the gap between each item. So we're going to scroll down again, and we're going to look for that vertical gap and set that to 24 pixels. I still think that we could do some adjustments to the font size here. So let's set this to 24 pixels again, and we're just going to adjust the width of that element just so we can see everything. And let's set that to the top left. Perfect. Let's give things a little bit more breathing room. Now for me on mobile, a view all or load more button should sit below all of the items, so we can scroll down get some context, and then see, yeah, okay, I want to see more of these. So this brings me to a point I forgot to mention. We haven't actually changed the text on this button. So if we just go back to desktop, we're going to double click the button and change that text to see all. This would act as a button that would basically navigate us to a projects page where we can go and view more. So you'd commonly use the home page to display 2, 3, maybe 4 items from a collection, and then you'd click through to a dedicated listing page for that collection. So for example, with a blog, you might display, say, 3 or 4 blog items on your homepage, but then there'll be a button to take you through to your blog where you can explore the much more expansive collection. So back to mobile, and what we're going to do is we're going to move this button below all of our items. And we're going to set the width to fill the canvas, and we're going to give this section the height it needs to fit in all of this content. One more thing to note is that the padding needs to remain consistent. So you'll notice that the padding isn't quite right. On the hero section, we've gone with 24 pixels of padding on the left and right. But as we've scrolled down, and Wix Studio will do this automatically for you, it's going to try its best to adjust the sections per device, but you will still need to go in there every now and then and make those manual changes. So for me, I still want to see 24 pixels on the left and right. And we can either keep 28 pixels, but I'm probably going to go with somewhere around 48 just to be a bit more generous with the gap on the top and bottom. So there we have it. If we go and give this a preview by dragging to resize, you can see this is looking really good. If we scroll down, however, you'll notice that the button is not behaving as you'd expect. You can see it's growing and shrinking, not in sync with the other elements in this section. The reason for that is that it's not set to be responsive. So if we select the button and we come across onto the design panel, we want to set the responsive behavior for this button to scale proportionally. Ensure that the width is still correct. And now again, as we adjust, this is going to scale in line with the rest of our content. So let's give this one final preview. If we click preview, scroll all the way down and then start adjusting this section, that is looking really good. And you can see how the button and the main heading for this section is scaling, but the text that we set to fix, the title for the project, actually stays at exactly the same size as the screen width changes. So you're in full control with Wix Studio over how the responsive behavior affects each individual element and section. So that's how I would approach a CMS-based responsive website in Wix Studio, and hopefully you can see how easy it is to adjust that responsive behavior across different elements and different sections, and then to further refine that on tablet and mobile. If you have any questions related to Wix Studio or responsive design in general, or maybe the CMS, then just drop them in the comments below and I'll be pleased to answer them for you. And again, if you're serious about growing your brand online, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.